18 players, and welcome back. It is either championship or semifinals week, depending upon your league. And Bob, I mean, that's just good times, good feelings knowing you're there. We got playoff teams, implications in the NFL, left and right, up and down the season. Where do you want to start with this?
I think that one of the most important parts to start at is this game tonight, because it really does mean a lot for the teams that are in it.
Oh, yeah.
Let's first focus on the Rams right now. The Rams are at a point right now where they're playing for a playoff spot, just as the New Orleans Saints are, but they seem to be in a better position than the Saints overall. From a team construction standpoint, from a play standpoint, they did let the Commanders come back in that game this past week. So
yeah, but they also had a 21-point cushion in the fourth quarter. I can't really blame them for that. There's like human nature in that.
Hey, Aman. So let's get to Aman's question here, and then let's talk this game tonight, because I think it's going to be one that might shock some people. So Aman, welcome back. Merry Christmas. Do I play the Chiefs or the Bills D this week? This is a really good question. We always like defense questions, so
I do.
Let's take a look at it. So the Bills play the Chargers, and no Herbert again.
No coach.
No coach. Coach got fired. So there's some things to like about that situation there.
The Chiefs are also playing a backup quarterback and a backup coach.
Chiefs again playing a backup quarterback, backup coach. So here's where I fall on this one. It's been proven that this past week, that game, that Raiders Chargers game, was one of the weirdest games that you could say we've seen in a while, where the Raiders came out after scoring 0 points the previous week to score 63 points in an offensive explosion.
Well, also against the defense that quit.
Right. And they're logistically, I don't feel like the Chargers are going to play as bad as they played against the Raiders, because they got their rocks blown off.
Dude, it's a team that's a finesse team without a culture that quit, man. What makes you think it's going to change?
The reason I bring this up is because both Buffalo and Kansas City have not really been these offensive powerhouses that we've been looking for over the last several weeks, with James Cook notwithstanding last week's performance. So the Chargers are going to have a situation on their hands where they have a quarterback that could definitely throw a lot of interceptions. They have a running back who will run all over them. That will be almost a guarantee. But how many touchdowns will Buffalo score? Is this a team that we've seen in the last couple of weeks being able to score, a tremendous amount of touchdowns? We know the Chargers aren't good at causing turnovers, and we know Buffalo is pretty good at making turnovers. So let's go to the Kansas City side here. Kansas City is playing a Raiders team that has found their identity under their interim head coach.
Yeah, it's hand the ball off. No doubt about that.
And this offense is actually in a better situation, although Kansas City's defense, I feel, is a little bit better than Buffalo's overall in the grand scheme of things. They're average. I think they're both average.
Yeah.
But, I think they're slightly better. So with all that said, I think we go Buffalo on Saturday. And I think that hopefully that you can get some more turnovers from Easton Stick. I think that, they're not going to run the ball a lot. So this game's probably going to be over. I mean, the Chargers aren't going to run the ball a lot, but I think this game will be over relatively quickly. I think it will probably be one of the quickest games this week, because all they need to do is just keep the ball in James Cook's hands and maybe throw it occasionally with Josh Allen. I don't think this is a game where Josh Allen is going to go wild, unfortunately, because I have him in my semifinal game. But I think it's comfortable to say that Buffalo would have the leg up in this decision for me here.
Well, I'm not going to say I agree with your game script completely by hating on Allen, but I'm definitely going to go with the answer is this. go with the hungrier defense, and that is the Bills. The Chiefs are in the playoffs. They know that. I think they've already clinched a division, actually. So at the end of the day, the Bills are in 100% win now mode. They know that Indy and Houston play each other. So de facto, they are in the playoffs right now, just given if they win out, they now have gone to the point where they control that destiny. So when you look at this overall, I think that the Bills are going to be the hungrier team to make things happen. I think that the Chargers have quit with a capital quit. And Vegas has
with a capital quit.
So, and Vegas has it. So that's the fundamental answer. Vegas is playing hard. They want that coach to stay there. San Diego, I mean, maybe you get a comeback, but again, finesse soft teams don't come back. So what are they going to do? They can't run the ball. Eckler never runs the ball well between the tackles. And the Bills defense is designed to play zones and jump routes. And with a backup quarterback, it's not going to sound pretty. So between these two, the Bills are one of the defense I'm more interested in this week overall. For that reason, you get a team to quit, you want to go all in on it. I want to go all in on whoever's playing Washington every week. Now, granted, this week it's the Jets, so it's a valid defense, but Washington is another team that has quit. I am fairly certain the Pittsburgh Steelers have quit offensively. So when you look at this, other offenses that quit or who you want to be against, that's two major wins for the Bills, and I think you're going to have a really solid selection there. And I love to see that you're in the semifinals or finals. Which one are you in, by the way? Let us know. Are you in the finals or the semis, depending on how long your league was? Because I'm interested. I'm glad you made it there. Glad we're getting regulars to the big dance.
All right. So while Ama is giving us that information, let's get back semis.
Semis. Love it, man. We're getting you the finals. We're getting you that hardware. That's happening, baby.
Good luck this week, Aman. We're looking forward to hearing about your win this week.
And love 100%. The way you built your team too, man. You got this.
So let's get back to this game tonight.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of repercussions on this game. Now, one of the players that I think has been quite a – you're welcome, Aman.
Got you, baby.
One of the players that's been quite the surprise for a lot of people this year and has been – just crushing his expecteds is Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams in this game tonight is he a must start for you, Joe? And is there any other must start players this week from this game specifically tonight?
Well, Williams without a doubt. I mean, the Williams, Kopp, the Puka. I mean, I'm not benching any of them. I'm not afraid of the New Orleans defense. Likewise, I'm playing Olave. I'm just telling you that outright. I'm playing Olave. I don't know it because I built my team at this point where I don't have other choices. But when you look at it and say overall, is Olave going to be the most confident of the tonight's group to go off? No, it's definitely Williams because the way that the Rams play is very intelligent. They play a run system that is opened up by the pass. And then in the second half, when they had the lead, they pounded down your throat. Now, last week we saw with them that they were willing to distribute the ball evenly across the two. And I think that's really just the direction McVay's taken this in this modern era. Clearly, Williams, despite the fumbles, was still the go-to guy in the red zone. Watching the game, that was the case. And they got in a spot where they got a lead and they proved they can milk it out. And the Rams have basically been playing for the last month already must-win football. They were 4-7. So McVay's done this dance before. He knows that in order to make the Super Bowl, you got to be able to keep everyone fresh and engaged. And going from a 100% running back who's getting 90+% of the carries and him going down to going to a backup is very hard to do. So splitting the carries is something that makes sense. That being said, Kareem still went off. So Kareem, I believe, is going to get the highest one. I do think that as we move forward, we are going to see some Puka action. And the guy that I think is going to be your disappointment is going to be Kamara from tonight's game. Because I really flat out see the Rams winning this one kind of handily. I mean, I don't know how to say this. I think the Rams are about to blow them out and say they belong and take this long week off and really
Okay.
coast into it. So I the reason I'm in on with Olave is because they're going to be throwing the ball. They're going to have to,
Mhm.
and there's a good chance this game's finished by Jameis Winston, and Olave loves catching the ball from Winston. So that's a long story short. I think the Rams are going to absolutely make a definitive statement. We're going to be in these playoffs, and go ahead, keep losing Green Bay because we'll take this
So,
whole.
if we go and look at these stats a little bit too, what you're saying does line up about Kamara. Kamara is playing against the Rams. The Rams have only let up 265 yards over the last 4 games to running backs in terms of
Which is
rushing,
abysmal.
and 93 yards receiving to a running back. So you look at where that
Just collectively under 80 yards a game to a running back.
You look at where that ranks overall, it's
That is
really
great.
crazy. That's not on a per game basis. That is total over the last 4 weeks.
Yeah, I got that. That's insane. That's
and
insanely good.
and when you look at those stats a little bit more and you flip it to the wide receivers that you mentioned for, against the Rams defense here, the Rams have let up one of the highest yards in terms of defenses at 737 yards through the air to opposing wide receivers with 6 touchdowns. So another value here, Joe, talk to us about Rashid Shaheed. He's back from an injury. Is there any value here, knowing that Derek Carr does have a problem going on long trips, hasn't done well historically against the Rams? Where do you fall on guys like Shaheed and maybe even like A.T. Perry too? Because I know some people are looking at those two as well.
Well, let's dive into New Orleans a little bit of a broader spectrum here. That coach is on the hot seat to make the playoffs. They're tied with Tampa with Baker Mayfield in charge, Tampa Bay. I cannot stress that enough, how disappointing that fact is. And you're at a spot where there's 3 games left. This is a sprint. Yes, you gave Carr all of that action, but if you get fired, you don't care what Carr does next year.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I said, I suspect the Rams to make the Saints one-dimensional, both because of what the defensive stats you said, but a large part that went into that was the Rams get leads early and they choke you out late with Kareem to continue the game script narrative. I see that happening again, which means you're going to have to chuck the ball. And who's the big deep down threat? Shaheed and Olave. So I'm definitely leaning that way. This is not going to be a cute, low-scoring game where the Taysom Hill experience will be worth investing in. So do I think that I want to play Shaheed? Probably not. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're in your finals now, you got yourself a decent receiving core, and he hasn't been part of it. So do I want to take him out over a scary Terry? Maybe, but I don't want to take him out over Cooks. So I guess that there's a possibility he goes off. He might be an interesting prop bet for an anytime score tonight because, again, they're going to be losing, chucking the ball. But I don't think I want to play him in any of my fantasy playoffs.
Now, knowing how a lot of these games have, let me just go back here and let's take a look at all the Monday night or all the Thursday night football games this year. Because when we look at these games, it's been.
This is New Orleans' second one. I believe the first one is the one that had a ton of points scored.
Right. These games have been really, really interesting so far this year. Let me see this lineup. So last week we had the Raiders show out. And then I can't see. I just want.
So the Raiders showed out when Kansas City quit.
Right.
We're also in quit season too. I mean, that's the other part of this. Look for teams that are quitting. The Jets are there. The Jets have quit.
Okay. So
New England surprisingly hasn't.
Week 2, we had the Eagles win 34-28. The Niners win 30-12. The Lions win 34-20. The Bears, that was the DJ Moore game, 40-20. Then the Chiefs game was probably your lowest scoring game, 19-8. Then 31-24, 24-18, 20-16, 16-13, 34-20, 34-13, 41-35, 21-18, 63-21. So the reason I bring this up
is you're seeing a lot of favorites covering the spread.
You're seeing a lot of favorites covering, but you're also seeing some favorites that the game was closer than we thought it was going to be for a good portion of this game. Like, for example, that Chiefs game, that game was a lot closer than it was supposed to be.
That's true.
The Packers game was a lot closer than it was supposed to be too. Towards the end, they were blowing them out early, and then the Green Bay started coming back a little bit in that game. And the only ones that we could definitively say were like absolute blowouts were the 49ers and the Bears, because that's what they were. So is there any...
Of course, last week's.
Well, yeah, that too, but that was not something that was expected to go that way. I'm saying, like the Cowboys versus Seahawks. Everybody thought the Cowboys were going to blow them out of the water. That didn't happen. Everybody thought the Steelers were going to beat the Patriots. That didn't happen.
No, it didn't.
You know, and people have, and you know, with Easton Stick in there, nobody actually thought the Chargers were going to win. So the Raiders were the favorite. They blew the brakes off of them, but we didn't understand how bad that was going to be, because that was really bad.
That's true. So there's something we've been hitting on basically all season long, which could be where you're going with this. And if you are, I apologize for cutting you off, Bob, but the Saints are an old team, and you have taken a day of rest away from them by them being on the road. And they are at a spot where they could be breaking when you've been watching this defense. Sure, they've kept a lot of teams tight in terms of low scoring, but there's some kinks coming in that armor. And one of the best people, if not the best, and I think I'd argue McVay might be at this in terms of making a schematical system for victory. I think it's happening. I do not see a way where the Rams do not cover tonight.
So, yeah, one of the reasons I did bring it up was because the last time they played on Thursday Night Football, the Jags were taking it to them, and they came back in the fourth quarter. And that game wasn't really close at all at any one point in time. Now you're looking at a spread of 4. And you're looking at an over-under of 45. Now, last week, the computer model accurately predicted that game would go over. I thought it was silly, but that went over in basically the first quarter. Which was so.
It's calling it over for today, for tonight as well.
So, how do you see this game shaking down in terms of points? Do you think it's going to be heavy early with the Rams and maybe a late comeback with the Saints, and that's what we're getting our points? Or do you think it's just going to be the Rams beating them down, even though the Rams defense in terms of wide receivers has been suspect over the last couple of weeks?
So in terms of scoreboard watching, I think it's going to be exactly like the Rams-Washington game from last week. Rams got up easy. They knew they were comfortable, and then they just let in some garbage touchdowns at the end. I think that's going to be the same thing. I still think they're going to win by a touchdown. I think that's basically what it's going to be. I don't think there's going to be ever a moment watching tonight's game where it's like, oh, the Rams aren't going to win this. Like, I think it's going to be painfully obvious. Just like when you see Mitch Trubisky hit the field, you know a turnover's coming eventually. It's going to be the exact same feeling you're going to have. New Orleans is not going to win. The other thing New Orleans has shown you a lot this year, there's things they should have done and been just mentally stronger at. And when they got pushed in that department physicality-wise, it did not work well with them in the second half of the year. You can make an argument their only physical win they have was the one over Tennessee. Every other team they beat was a finesse team or a coach that didn't play Bijan Robinson. And that is really all that their wins are. They're very good at beating finesse teams, but they are not super high scoring. And when they can get pushed around, especially older teams later in the years, it happens. I think this one could get embarrassing for a lot of reasons that add up to a substantial amount.
So I wanna ask you, this is the final question I want to ask you about this game.
We can go through each and every game like this, Bob. I'm loving it.
Is that, we're looking at a team that, like you said, doesn't put a lot of points on the board.
No.
And when
Much
they
to
do,
all the Olave love I had in the preseason, it is not happening. Carr
Yeah.
was a disappointment and a half.
and when they do, it's not really, they're not pumping them out, right? But the question I had for you is, you said that you are all a go on Cooper Kupp and Puka, and the Saints in their last 4 games.
Let me put a clause on that. That's for PPR leagues. I don't think I'm like that for standard leagues.
Okay, because this question centers around the amount of targets and yards that they've allowed. So we look at the Saints that over the last 4 weeks, 28 catches on 59 targets for 390 yards that they've let up in totality to wide receivers. So why I bring this up is that they've played New York, Carolina, Detroit, Atlanta. How accurate?
So one passing attack.
Yeah, how accurate do you feel, or like how much confidence do you think that this team has in stopping pass catchers, knowing that they only logistically faced one team that had at its core a much stronger passing attack?
If you can pull this up, in that game they played against Detroit, how many sacks did they get? Because I believe that this is going to answer the question more so than anything.
How many sacks?
Yeah, how many times was Goff sacked against New Orleans?
1.
Yep, that's the answer. Stafford will not have pressure on him, and they have a. This is an interesting question, but I think they have a better receiving core than Detroit. I don't think it's as deep as Detroit's receiving core, but I would take best on best Cooper Kupp over Amah, and I would take Puka over Laporta, just because I do believe Laporta is the second best pass catcher in Detroit. Again, Detroit's is deeper, but I think that the Rams' top 2 are better. And when I look at that, I think they're just going to carve them apart. One of the things we brought up a couple of weeks ago was no one plays man coverage against a Sean McVay team, because if they do, they get torn apart. They're the best team in the league against man coverage year round. Part of it is Stafford can put the ball anywhere. But the other part is Stafford's really good at picking apart a zone. I don't see the aging Saints slowing this team down. They've gotten lucky in the schedule by playing a couple of run teams, but at the end of the day, it's a very bad division, so they're playing bad opponents a lot, and I think that they're going to walk into a very, very big buzzsaw in the Rams.
And here's the thing too, Joe, is that those yards. So when you look at the yardage game by game, they allowed the Falcons 108. They allowed the Panthers 122. Now, they only let the Lions wide receivers get 72 because they let up 140 yards to Sam Laporta. Is there any value in a guy like Higbee tonight if you're looking for a tight end and you need somebody for this game? Is there any value there?
I don't think so.
No?
I mean, I really think this is going to be, we're going to get the ball down inside the 5-yard line, and we're just going to give it to Kareem Williams over and over and over again, because that's kind of what the Rams have been doing. Almost like the way Detroit did with their Williams last year.
Yeah. I mean, I could see it. I'm just kind of trying to figure out if there's, other than those big top dogs, anybody to look at. And if I mean,
it's also the playoffs. I mean, you shouldn't be hunting at this point unless you had an injury go down. If you had Chase go down, all right, I guess that's the example.
Yeah, I mean, that Chase has gone down, as Saquon's not playing well. You have a lot of.
I don't think I ever want Saquon Barkley on my team ever again. I think I've come to that conclusion after last week.
I'm suggesting this because there are some uncertainties in rosters.
But that's not the spot I want to look. I want to look at Downs against Atlanta. I want to look there
after what he hasn't done all year.
Pittman's not playing
in the last 4 weeks.
Without Pittman, I think he's going to go off.
I mean, I believe that's the opposite of what's going to happen, because he has not been on the last several weeks. Even like if we go, let me pull up his stats right
Or
now.
maybe even a Reynolds in Detroit. He's probably available everywhere. I can't tell you how much I love Cooks, but he should be rostered everywhere by now.
And one of the and
I don't think I want to play
there,
the Green Bay merry-go-round of receivers.
Wicks, if he's healthy, looks pretty good.
Boyd is already going to be in every league. Oh, here's what is going to go off. If you want someone who's going to go off, he's probably rostered, but no one likes him, so he maybe got cut. It's Gabe Davis. This is going to be a Gabe Davis blowout week.
You think so?
Yep, and then we're going to get play action established because of what Cook showed on tape. And again, the Chargers quit. So you just get one deep one behind him with someone who's half-assed, and it, boom, Gabe Davis, 50-yard touchdown.
That is a very intriguing option. Absolutely.
I mean, you don't run the ball that much and not do play action, and Allen loves chucking it. Again, in a dome, no weather factors.
Now, if you look at the matchups.
What's up, my man? Let's answer this question real quick, Bob.
How's it going? With Pittman being a full participant today, if he does play, should I bench Bijan, Gibbs, or Rice for him? So,
well, definitely not Rice. Rice is a must starter at this point. He's established himself at that point. He's getting the targets and getting the volume. So you don't bench Rice.
See, this is a tough one. When
it is.
All right, let's go through each.
I love Pittman. I have to start out outright. I love him. I love the volume that he gets, and that's a fact. When we look over here, I want to play Pittman. There's no doubt about that. So now it's, do I want to bench Bijan or do I want to bench Gibbs? And I guess you got Bob. Give me the answer over the last 3 weeks, but I'm feeling like the answer has to be got to bench Bijan. Atlanta hasn't been doing anything.
Nino, can you just specify a little bit more? Is that if you play Pittman, are you playing him in your flex or are you playing him at your wide receiver 2? Because I'm curious if the question is, can you play Pittman and one of these guys, or is it Pittman or one of these guys? Just to be a little bit more specific with the question.
See, I took this as those three or who would have to come out for Pittman enters roster, one of those three, which means he probably has another running back stacked on his lineup, is how I'm taking this. And Gibbs and Bijan are his flex.
So in my point of view here, I think that Rice is okay. All right, cool. Thanks, Nino. Yeah, I actually am not playing Pittman this week, Joe.
I love him.
It's not the talent level for Pittman for me. I think it's more of the scared to get injured play for me here. So Gibbs and Rashad, Amon-Ra, Rice, and then Bijan at flex right now. So I think that where I come out on Pittman is that the matchup is good.
Mm-hmm.
We can't fight the matchup. The matchup is a good matchup. And I would say check in when they play to see what it's going to look like for him. But all in all, I don't think Bijan is worth playing right now.
Yeah.
And the stats back that up to a degree. So when we come in and we look at, just mind you, I'm on Rishi Rice. I love Rishi Rice.
Mm-hmm.
He had a great game against the Raiders the first time they played in November. 8 receptions for 107 yards and 1 touchdown. That was his first 100-yard game.
That was when he started turning on, right?
And he hasn't stopped. He's had 3 touchdowns in the last 4 games. So he's clearly being trusted by Patrick Mahomes, because we know that Patrick Mahomes can't trust any of the other wide receivers on his team. So he is going to be peppered with targets, and we know that the Raiders have weaknesses in the secondary that are exploitable. So I don't think that Rice is benchable.
Nope.
So then you go to Gibbs, and you say, okay, I did not like that news that just came across the wire. Devonta Smith is questionable. So hopefully that's nothing. When you go to Gibbs against Minnesota, Joe, how do you feel about Minnesota's defense against running backs this year? Because that's kind of where we're trying to figure this out. Where will Pittman slot in? Is it?
I'm slotting him over Bijan and not even getting past that problem. Once I know Bijan should be out, I stop thinking. I mean, I'm not to negate your question here, because at the end of the day, when you look at Minnesota, I mean, they've been susceptible. Minnesota's a great scheme defense this year, but they lack some talent. So when I look at the way, particularly Detroit's going to attack them, I'd attack them through the air. And Gibbs gives you more air options. That being said, the one thing about watching Detroit is you always hate when Monty scores. At least I do. Monty has always annoyed me in that regards. So I'm benching Bijan. I'm benching Bijan. That's another coach that should be fired, and he hasn't really woken up and figured it out. That being said, I believe the entire NFC South loses this week. So when you add up that other factor, I think they're going to lose. You're not going to really get a chance to do it. I think the Colts could do one of their just running out of the tables games. I think Pittman's going to be a big part of that. Pittman's probably getting 8 catches on their soft underneath stuff that Atlanta refuses to cover the pass.
And here's the thing too, Nino. When we look at the Colts over the totality of the entire season, yeah, they haven't played the best of the best at the running back position at all, but they have led up 583 yards through the air to running backs. And that right now is where the value is in Bijan Robinson. And if you take a look and you consider that through the whole season, that's top 5. So they haven't let up a lot of touchdowns to running backs in the last couple of weeks. And the yards through the air the last couple of weeks haven't been as high. Or they've been high, but they haven't been a lot of touchdowns for them. So the value in Bijan is through that air. Will Arthur Smith decide that he wants to play him? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. And so where it comes down to me right now is look for the health of, because you're going to know, look for the health of Pittman. If Pittman's not playing, then Bijan's in. But I think that's where the question is, because the Colts aren't that good at defending running backs through the air.
I also look at it like this. Detroit's going to score a ton of points. Atlanta probably isn't. Although the Colts have been prone to letting up weird high-scoring games. I just the Colts are a team that has a chance of winning of taking the lead in their division this week. Granted, it would take Jacksonville to get upset by Tampa, but I do think that when we look at this and say, hey, Detroit's going to score. I'm not sure Atlanta's going to score. And I know that if you're in a PPR, the Pittman's getting 8 catches. So I'm not sure Bijan gets 80 yards. So when you look at it like that, to me, it's a no-brainer. Plus, Gibbs has really stepped up in the red zone. He got, 2 touchdowns last week? So.
Oh, yeah. I think the decision comes down, Joe, is it Bijan or Pittman? That's the decision, because Gibbs and Rice shouldn't leave the lineup.
No.
So the decision is Bijan or Pittman. And thankfully, they're playing in the same game. So you can wait until Sunday and ask and check the health. And then it's a non-question if Pittman isn't healthy. And I think the only question mark, like I said earlier, with Pittman for me is that he is a volume hog. He's going to get it's hard to trust Bijan.
Yes, it is.
And the only thing that would worry me, like I said earlier about Pittman, is a psychological thing, is that he just got rocked by Kazee, and, that doesn't leave your brain as fast as a concussion might. So you might not be in protocol, but you might be more hesitant to do the things that you did in the past, knowing that you don't know what's going to happen. And that goes.
Yeah, but the thing was, the play he got hit on wasn't his standard play this year. Most of his catches are essentially at the line of scrimmage, fall forward, get 8 yards. That's why his average is so small.
And that's
He's not really a downfield guy, and he got hit on a downfield route. So.
And that's true. And that would be my only worry with Pittman, if in fact he is playing, because he's such a solid play on a week-to-week basis that his numbers just in catches alone will get you past a lot of star wide receivers of the last couple of weeks. His volume in catches would have gotten you more points than Stephon Diggs over the last 3 weeks, which is crazy.
I don't think Minshew's going to slow down throwing the ball. I do not think you need to worry about that at all. Because first off, that's not the way that this guy coaches. He basically goes, if you're out there, you're out there. So Pittman has been the driving force of that offense. Yeah, they run the ball well when Taylor's there, but Pittman is the force.
And Pittman,
and I don't think you need to worry about Minshew throwing less.
Yeah, Downs, and here's the thing,
Kenny.
Welcome, Kenny. Here's the thing, Downs, like Joe said, before you asked the question, we were just talking about potentially starting Downs as a wide receiver this week if Pittman doesn't play, and to look for that if it's something. I actually don't like Downs for a very specific reason, is that you look at his receptions and targets over the last, 6 weeks since the games over in Germany. And they've gone, other than the game against Tampa where he had 13 targets but only 5 catches because Minshew kept overthrowing him, it's been stuck at 3. And so even when Pittman went down, the ball's not going more to Downs. So Pittman is the guy.
They also didn't need to. The Steelers couldn't stop anything on the ground last week.
But Joe, even in a game where they were losing to the Bengals, that ball wasn't going to Josh Downs. Even in a game that was tight against Tennessee, the ball wasn't going to Josh Downs. And even in a game where they were stuck against New England, the ball was not going to Josh Downs. The last game where Josh Downs had a fantasy-worthy start would have been against New Orleans, where he went 7 for 72, and then the game before that, 5 for 125. He's really fallen off. And it's not worth starting Downs even if Pittman isn't playing, in my mind.
So do we think the Ravens can affect Run CMC? You're playing against them in your championship. Well, first off, Kenny, congratulations on making your championship.
Hope that helps to you.
Now we need to define slowdown, because that guy has been a freak. And, Bob, it's been, maybe almost a decade since the player who should have been number 1 overall or number 2 overall, either way, has literally carried a league. We've been getting a lot of the top 3 guys just not performing in that fashion. Some of it's injury history, whatever. Like this year, J. Jeff gets hurt. Run CMC did not get hurt. Universally the 2nd pick overall, and boom, he won basically people's leagues. So the Ravens is the best defense to try to slow him down, without a doubt. Aside from maybe the Rams, they would be the one I would want in this season right now. So you have the absolute best chance, Kenny. That being said, I still think he's getting at least a touchdown. Because that's the way that offense works. This offense is one of few that believes in a novel idea called spacing. Don't have everyone next to each other tight to the quarterback at the snap of a ball. They are not afraid to have their receivers start outside of the numbers, unlike so many teams in this league. Most teams would prefer your player to be inside the numbers and then curve out on a deep fade. Because these guys start so much further, there's more space open in the middle of the defense at the beginning of each play. It also is an immediate tell if they're cheating the run or the pass from a defensive perspective. So this is part of why Purdy has such an easier life. He's got a pre-snap tell that is helping him by his formation that most coaches are unwilling to do because they do so much bunch crap to the line of scrimmage. So do I think it's possible to affect McCaffrey? Yes, but there's a huge caveat. I still think he's getting $150 and a touchdown. So when you look at it like that, he's going to be the highest score player in the game. That's a given regardless. Now, is he going to go off for 3 touchdowns like Arizona went off? No, I don't think that that's realistic either. Arizona is a team that kind of quit, kind of maybe restarted, but they're going to quit again. So I look at this and say, you have the best possibility of slowing him down, but expect at least a 25 to be next to his name by the end of that game.
So I would love to instill confidence, Kenny, but I am in agreement with Joe, and I think I'm actually this game is going to be won by Christian McCaffrey if San Francisco wins this game against the Baltimore Ravens. We look back, the last time that the Ravens played against a really capable running back that wasn't banged up and they were in a competitive game with was Kyren Williams. And Kyren Williams got the ball 25 times for 114 yards. And, you know, you look at it and you say, Christian McCaffrey is a maybe different style of running back than Kyren Williams for sure. But the fact is that every time they've played a team this year, even let's go back to the Arizona game week 8. Amari DeMercado had 78 yards. So the yards are going to be there for Christian McCaffrey. It's just dependent on, you know, how is he going to be used more as a receiving threat or is he going to be used more as a running threat? I think it's going to be won through Christian McCaffrey this week because, you know, Debo's been on a hot streak. He's really been playing above expectations, and he's probably going to come down to earth a little bit against this secondary and against this team in general. So the ball is going to go towards Christian McCaffrey. The only saving grace that you might have is that Christian McCaffrey's gassed at the goal line and they put in one of their backup running backs.
Or Baltimore sits on the ball. But let's get your answer here. So one running back, 2 receiver, 2 flex.
Eckler isn't startable, unfortunately.
That team quit around him. So if Taylor plays, I'm playing him because I believe that they're going to run right through him, especially given the Pittman injury. So, but if he doesn't, you know, it's either going to be Chandler or Mixon. Probably Chandler, given the way that the Detroit defense is more geared up for the pass, despite the fact their defensive line is crazy. They've been letting up some running action. So starting in the running back slot, that's there. Going for your 2 starting receivers, I'm starting all 3 of them, actually, between Kupp, Ayuk, and Higgins. Higgins might get slowed down a little bit. Porter is surprisingly a great rookie press man guy. He will be on Higgins without Chase being playing. So that's a little bit because when he played the Bengals the first time, he only allowed 27 yards being Joey Porter. So that's a little bit of a concern with Higgins. But I'm definitely playing Kupp and Ayuk. I don't really have a choice there. And then I guess it comes down between Mixon, Higgins, and Flowers, pick 2. Actually, let me back. If JT plays, I'm playing Chandler as well. So that's another part of it. I mean, Mixon could also go off. I mean, I can see this being a game where Mixon carries the Bengals, and because they can't throw. Tyler Boyd is a nice number 3. He's not really a number 2. I do think Higgins is the most underrated receiver in football. I just love the way that Porter's results are against star receivers across the league. So if I'm looking at the Steelers game, what I think will happen is the Steelers will have a horrendous offense and the Bengals will end up taking a lead at some point and Mixon will just chew up the yardage as the Steelers defense erodes. So I think that Mixon's going to give you a solid showing. That being said, I don't want to bench Higgins. This is hard for me, Bob.
Let's shine some light on this for you here.
Yeah.
In regards to Chandler, Chandler blew up last week. It was something that not a lot of people were expecting.
It wasn't completely unprovoked. He'd done it earlier in the year too.
We favored a couple other guys over Chandler, and I know a lot of people probably did the same thing.
Including Mixon.
What we need to bring across the board for you though is the Lions against the run. Joe said that they've been giving up some running plays, but let's be honest here. The plays that they've been giving up haven't been in bunches at all.
No, they
So
haven't.
let's take a look at the last 5 games that they played, last 6. Let's go back to week 10, because that was when they played the Chargers. There was 24 rushes in that game, and Eckler got 67 yards.
Chargers can't run the ball. They're not a physical team.
I know. Then we go to the Bears. They played the Bears, the Packers, the Saints, the Bears, the Broncos.
Okay,
So
there's some running teams in there.
there are some running teams in there, but those running backs they're not going for a load of yards. So as I see this, is this looking good for Chandler? No, because the Lions rank 4th in fantasy points against running backs over the last 4 weeks. When you take that to the totality of
because they're doing it by game script, though. They're not doing it by personnel.
And when you take
they're doing it because you're losing by so much, you got to chuck it. And Detroit's scoring on Minnesota. There's
when you take it over
that.
the whole season, Joe, they're number 1 against running backs.
Yeah. All right. So that makes sense, though. They also score.
So they've given up 8 touchdowns. So there's a possibility for them to give up a couple to Chandler there. It's definitely a possibility. So then let's look at the situation here with Mixon. The Steelers ranked 14th overall against fantasy points per running back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or not 14th overall. That's their wide receivers. They ranked 22nd against running backs. So we know that these teams, it's often because the Steelers, the game's kind of over at some point in time against the Steelers. They can't do anything offensively. So why pass the ball when you've already got a lead against the Steelers and you can just run the clock down on them? So will Cincinnati have the lead? I think it's possible. Browning has been playing really well. He's got a lot of confidence. He wants to show up teams that have, benched him, dropped him, all these things.
He's also playing a third-string quarterback on the other side of the field.
He also is going to be playing Mason Rudolph. So there's a good chance that the Bengals are going to be on the field on their offensive side of the ball a lot. So I think Mixon is a hard start for me. I think he's in my lineup. Mixon is the first person in the lineup. The second
JT is for me because he's JT.
Well, yeah, if he plays.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I'm building 2 lineups. The JT plays, the JT doesn't play lineup.
And if he does play, Moss is also hurt. So is he going to get the full complement of snaps? That's something to think about. So for me, I'm starting Mixon at my running back position, bar none, no doubt. I think he's going to have a good game.
Championship week, we built a lineup that could have had Eckler and not have him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my next one is Kupp. I think that you can't bench Kupp, although, what we have.
Kupp's going off tonight, man. You got to play Kupp.
What we have seen out of New Orleans is that they're number 3 on the season in terms of fantasy points given up to wide receivers. They haven't been giving up a lot of points in recent weeks.
They also haven't been playing a good quarterback in a month.
Exactly, but they haven't played a lot of good teams at all either. So, you look at that and you say, that is kind of a skewed stat. So Kupp is definitely starting for me. Then you take a look at this matchup. Higgins has a really tough matchup. He's going to draw Porter. Porter is extremely, extremely physical. And I feel that it's going to have to go Higgins' way eventually at some point in this game. But Porter can erase players. He's capable of erasing players. And I think that Higgins, for me, although it seems like a no-brainer start, would definitely be a hard to start player for me. Just because the matchup is not great. Now, when he's not on, I don't see how the Steelers don't shadow him with Porter the whole game. It would make no sense. So then we have to look at Ayuk. And, they have a pretty good secondary, in Baltimore. And it's going to be a tough matchup for him. He's going to draw really good corner. Debo has a tough matchup too. And that's why I said this game's probably going to see a lot of Christian McCaffrey. So we also know that Ayuk is the biggest boom kind of player that you have where he could have 3 receptions, 40 yards, and a touchdown. He could go off for 125 yards, but he hasn't recently because of Debo's been so strong and so productive. Then you fly back down to Flowers here, and Flowers draws a bad matchup as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the matchup is bad per se, you gotta go with what are the physical characteristics of these wide receivers, and are they talented? Where's the talent at on this field? So for me, I would go Kupp and Ayuk because I think that Debo will draw a little bit more away from Ayuk this week, and I think that Christian McCaffrey also offers a lot more, and they're going to have to really try to bear down on Brock Purdy in that game and cause a decent amount of disruption. So I think that there's going to be opportunities that Ayuk is going to have that's going to be able to get some yak and turn it up the field. So for me, this is Mixon at running back, at my running back position, Kupp and Ayuk as my 2 wide receivers. And then in the flex position, you got to start JT.
Mm-hmm.
You have to. And then I think it's dealer's choice. I really think that when you look at that last flex position, Kenny, that go with what your gut tells you on this one. And, Eckler is the guy that you thought was going to carry you to the end of the season. If you think he has a chance to do that in this game, which I do not think he does, against Buffalo, you could start him. Chandler showed you a lot last week. Detroit's been really pretty good against the run. Are they going to
the other thing with Minnesota, just to go on that Chandler thing, Nick Mullins showed that he can't handle it. So they're going to have to go on the Chandler.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone in the world saw that. So when everyone knows it has to go in a certain direction, can the team support it? And I'm not sure Minnesota's offensive line can. I mean, just point blank. So, but I think that's pretty fair. We're saying Flowers is the one who's not considered at all, though, because you don't want to use any. San Francisco's defense is designed to attack the perimeter of the line of scrimmage. Basically, what I mean by that is the wide receiver screens and the outside runs, and that's all Flowers makes his money in.
Right.
So Flowers needs to be off your list, and without JT, I mean, you're forced to play Higgins in Bijan, I guess. Because I think I would go Bijan over Eckler. Knowing that Atlanta's in a must-win game, I think he's going to wake up and say, hey, maybe I should get the ball to my best player.
Yeah, Kenny, and
especially after that pick that threw that season away last week.
And that's definitely where I fall on this too, is that if I were to choose any of these players based off of gut feeling going into this week that's not on stats, because Mixon, Kupp, and Ayuk are supported by stats and game script and all of that.
And so is JT.
And JT if he happens to play. The other ones, like I said, it is dealer's choice. And I think out of all of these, I would go with Bijan because, like I said earlier to Nino, is that the Colts do give up a fair amount of yardage to running backs through the air. That is where Bijan's value is. So although he might only rush for like 25 yards in this game, there's a good chance that he gets 5 receptions, 60 yards, and a touchdown. That is a very possible thing for Bijan to do, despite how Arthur Smith has been treating him over the last several weeks. So for me, Kenny, it's Mixon, Kupp, Ayuk, and then JT and Bijan. If JT happens to not play, and you won't know that until Sunday, so that means Higgins is off the table and Eckler's off the table, I think then you go with Chandler into that slot.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that helps. You're in a tough situation because you've got a lot of star power on your team, but a lot of underperforming stars in not so great situations.
Yeah, because that's the thing is if you play Higgins, you're locked into only either Bijan or JT. So I think you have to sit down and just hope in JT. unless you get an answer before Saturday. In JT, I would hope.
Yeah, and hopefully that helps Kenny, because with
also, by the way, stacked roster. By the way, my man, total props on you to build this thing.
I hope you're playing in the championship 100%.
He said he was. He's playing in the championship against McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need to maximize your lineup, because I think McCaffrey will go off. But I want to get into something that I think is important for fantasy purposes too, in terms of schedules. When we look at the schedule over the last couple of weeks, especially with injury reports, typically, we'll get the full injury report, 45 minutes before the game kicks off.
Yes.
And that makes it challenging if you've got a lot of late games in there. Yeah. But you look at all these early games that we've been having in the holiday season here, and you've got 3 games before Sunday that have fairly good or fairly high ramifications for fantasy championships and fantasy semifinals. Mm-hmm. Tonight you've got Olave and Kyren Williams, Kupp and Puka. Saturday you've got Josh Allen, Diggs, Eckler, Keenan Allen, Najee, and there's no
one from Pittsburgh Steelers offense to be mentioned.
There's so much happening, and then you've got these big injuries that have happened in the couple of weeks leading up to these last few games, mm-hmm. where we would want an answer as fantasy players going into this week a little bit earlier. And we've seen, and like I said, while we were talking across the wire here, it says Devonta Smith is questionable. I got a message that said Cole Kmet is questionable, but these websites stick the questionable tag on players if they just miss a practice, mm-hmm. regardless of how they missed it. So my question to you is, Joe, is when you're at this point in the season and you're in your playoffs and in your championship game, what do you do with these injuries? How do you approach? Do you avoid those early games in the hopes that your player is playing? What do you do?
Well, I guess my starting point is to give you the background here is, unlike Kenny, somewhere around week 10, I try to make it so I don't have any more choices I have to make. So I would have moved a bunch of the talent to try to isolate it into one upgrade. So that tends to be what I do, so the conversation comes up less. But to answer your question, you got to build your ideal lineup first, and then just look at it realistically from there. So there's a good chance that Olave is already one of your flexes. So it's, if he doesn't play, we pull him out. The issue is when you get the alert and you don't have time to do anything about it, he's stuck in your lineup. That's the ultimate worst thing you can have in your playoffs. So as I look at this and say, build your lineup first you want if there was no such thing as any injury designation. And then from there, the ones that do, you just gotta pay attention. You gotta know what it is for. And that's a big part of it is if it's illness, I disregard it altogether. If it's an injury that's a lower body injury, I give it a lot more stock than an upper body injury, mm-hmm. With the exception of concussions, because that's literally a blueprint. It tells you black and white. If you have a setback, you're not playing. So that's how I treat those. I rank lower body injuries ahead of upper body injuries.
That's good to know, because with the rise in concussions and the rise in players being treated for concussions because they're being better safe than sorry, there's a lot going into it that a lot of these teams aren't making known to the media, and therefore not making known to fantasy players,
which is illegal. That is illegal. People will be fined massive amounts of money in the offseason once that gets proven.
It definitely does affect it. So, Joe, let's get into a couple of games this week that mm-hmm. you think are good. And feel free, if you're joining us, to ask us any questions about fantasy or anything about the games that are going on this week that you would want to have share an opinion about. We're ready to talk. But Joe, I want to know a couple of these games here, and a lean one way or the other about how you feel in regards to these games. So we got a question from Randy. Randy, welcome.
This is right in line with what you were saying here. Zay Flowers or Devontae. So Devontae, did we get an answer about why he didn't practice yet, Bob? Has that come out?
No, it It did not.
So
It
the
just came
joy of
across on
this is
Yahoo.
that Flowers is playing after Devontae. So we start with the answer we just had. Given everything in an ideal situation with
Knee
no
injury.
injuries, what a knee injury?
Mm-hmm.
But let me finish the thought. Everything all equal, if there were no injuries, it would be Smith without a question. So given the fact that it's a knee, can we now factor in the percentage of Smith, probably 75% of him versus Zay Flowers? Zay Flowers is in his absolute worst matchup of the entire season for the way he plays. Baltimore uses him as a 5 yards or less receiver. The entire San Francisco defense sells out for the first 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. I do not see a scenario where Zay is productive at all. The New York Football Giants are a dumpster fire. And even a 75% Devontae Smith in a game that now they need to win because Phillies went from, oh, even if we lose to San Francisco, we're still going to win the division to, oh, we need to start winning some football games or we're going to be on the road the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a night and day change of what's going over there. And I do think that they're going to put up a lot of points against those Giants. So unless you see Devontae Smith is not playing, I think I'm going with there. So, okay. Linebacking core is nuts, plus OBJ no practice today. Yeah, I mean, that's all true, but they're not going to change the way they use Flowers.
Mm-hmm.
They've shown that they'd rather put Likely going deep than Flowers going deep, which is a big concern for Flowers' long-term production. So the Beckham not playing to me upgrades likely more than it upgrades Flowers just by the way that they use them and who's more the complement to who.
Yeah, and Randy, I do think that
yes, Randy, to answer your follow-up question, yes.
Yeah, if you're gonna go with if you're gonna want to have any wide receiver in your back pocket in case Devonta Smith doesn't go, because yes, he was in street clothes today, possible knee injury happening there, but he's got until Monday. So today's Thursday, that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Maybe,
he's not till Sunday. He's not on Monday. Baltimore's Monday.
Yeah, Baltimore's Monday too.
Yeah, but Devontae's the one who was out.
Dude, there are 3 games on Monday. There are 3 games on Monday this week.
This is Christmas. My bad. So, messing my whole week up.
But here's the blessing for you, Randy, is that Philly plays first on Monday. So they played 4:30. The Ravens played 8:15. So you look at it and you ask yourself and you say, all right, if Smith can't go, which Baltimore wide receiver would I rather have? And the answer would be Bateman. So what I would do is if I had a chance to put in a waiver claim for him, the game would favor Bateman, guys that could get downfield a little bit more than say Flowers. So even like, I'm not going to say it, but a sneaky play could be a guy like Nelson Aguilar, because it's just one of those stupid things that the Ravens like to do sometimes.
It is. I mean, that's something up.
And we know Flowers will probably get like 4 receptions at least. He'll probably get 30 yards, but there's not going to be any boom potential for him against this linebacking core. Now, if it came down to it and Smith couldn't go, which would really suck for myself as well, because I have Devonta Smith going in my semifinal.
Wide open, baby.
That Bateman would be a better play than Flowers. So I'd stick in a waiver claim for Bateman, and I would consider dropping my lowest common denominator, because, if you're in your championship game, it doesn't really matter who you drop as long as you drop them late. So like later. So just know that you're going to have to put this waiver claim in most likely
before Saturday,
so that you can get Bateman. But I think he's a good play, Randy. So let's hope that Devonta Smith is in, because his matchup would be salivating, and it's an amazing matchup. It would really be a disappointing matchup to not have. If he couldn't go, a sneaky play could be Zacchaeus as well. Just because the Giants are really no good at defending the pass.
They're not.
So, anybody else from that wide receiving core would be good. but Hurts also has been turning the ball over at a rapid rate this year, so it's something to be concerned about for Philadelphia. But hopefully you're able to win this week, Randy, with a possibility of. I think Goddard would be a must start.
Yes, that's a no doubt, Randy. Because Goddard and Devontae steal each other's reps more than anyone else. Mm-hmm. We look at last year when Smith went off, it was directly after Goddard went out. And same true vice versa. If Smith isn't in, Goddard's going to increase in value. But to finish the point about the Niners defense, the only way you actually beat them is you got to do what Minnesota did. You got to be unwilling and uncaring if your quarterback gets lit up and you got to put that ball downfield. Baltimore is willing to put the ball downfield. I lean more likely if Beckham doesn't play, but if Beckham plays, Beckham would be the one I would go with of the entire Baltimore room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Beckham, it's going to be problematic for Baltimore this week.
Baltimore's not going to have an easy ride. There's no way around it. And the other thing is they spread it around. It really could be any of the three between likely Bateman and Beckham. But I like
it's going to be their toughest game of the year.
Yeah, and if Baltimore does win it, it's going to really change some minds. I mean, I already think they're winning the AFC, but if they do win it, it could be crazy. Oh, we got a payout here. We're talking about.
Woo!
I love your buy-in, baby. I love what you're doing there, Randy.
And Randy, I think that when you look at this, when you look at the lineup that you're facing, it's not scary. And there's a couple reasons why. So let's just kind of, even if you make a decision,
Ramondre's on a team that's quit.
Yeah. So, even if you make a decision here that,
Keenan Allen certainly is on a team
sets you back a couple of points. Let's just take a look at the week 16, the schedule here. I just had it up and then I got rid of it.
Yeah, I don't think Keenan Allen's going to be super productive against the Bills. I don't think anyone on the Chargers is. So I'm liking that starting point.
And then Trevor Lawrence against Tampa. T-Law could go off against Tampa. It is it's a very likely thing that could happen. That's a tough matchup. Tampa is ranked exactly in the middle. Shockingly enough, this is not something I would have thought because the wide receivers have been having some good games, but they've only given up 3 touchdowns, Tampa's defense, in the last 4 weeks to quarterbacks. In the last 4 weeks, given up 3 touchdowns.
I'm saying even if they play, man, it's first off, Lawrence is playing that game no matter what. So you don't need to worry about that.
Lawrence will definitely play.
Stevenson is questionable, but even if he's not, the matchup.
Who's the rest of his team, Randy? Just
is not. Yeah. Give us the projected lineup, putting Lawrence in there as their starter.
And give us your projected lineup too.
Because looking at this, second round picks out, his third or fourth round picks out, depending on when he got Allen. Mm-hmm. You should probably have a pretty good starting advantage at the front, even though your third pick might be out. You're just going out draft. Now that's why I love finding out what people did with their trades throughout the year.
Yeah, put it in the chat, Randy. Joe and I are really curious about that. And speaking of curiosities and teams that are intriguing this week in a kind of a general perspective here, is this Jacksonville-Tampa game?
It's a big one for both sides.
Out of all the games on the docket this week, this is one of those ones that does mean a hefty amount to the teams playing in it for playoff contention. Jacksonville, we're everybody's projecting that they're still going to be winning the division. But in the NFC South, it's getting quite dirty there, Joe. So how do you see that game shaping out here?
So I already tipped myself off when I said the entire NFC South is going to lose. So that's the starting point. Is I do believe Jacksonville's going to win that game. A lot of reasons why. The first is that Baker's due to blow it. I mean, there's no science behind explaining that, other than watching Baker Mayfield for 5 years. All right, let's get this lineup here. T-Law, Pacheco, Addison. Dude, I don't love that lineup. You got to go into Njoku. This is who you're playing, but he absolutely has to go to Njoku. Flacco loves him. He doesn't have a second running back if Stevenson's out. I would take that with some pretty great strength. I'd also assume that is this like a 20-man league?
It's
because
scary.
That team should not be in the finals.
Pacheco has been good enough until he got hurt.
No, I get that, but that's
Randy.
How big is your league, Randy?
Randy, I really do like your chances here, especially because we need to get more information about Pacheco too, because he didn't play last week. So there's a good chance he might not have a starting running back playing this week. With that said, Addison and Garrett Wilson, Garrett Wilson is whatever the Jets decide to do this week. Garrett Wilson has one of the best matchups the whole season that he's ever going to have. He
just doesn't have anyone to throw him the ball
against a team that looks like they've also given up. So,
yeah.
And Njoku has been on fire. So I got boxed out by Njoku a couple weeks back, and he was on my list of tight ends that I really liked going into the season, and Flacco is proving that he's a favorite target of his. So that's an interesting one there.
Dude, whoa. All right. Again, one thing is not like the other. So that guy got the first round bye.
Like I said, a lot of lucky wins.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, your team should smoke him. Yeah.
Love the $100 buy-in.
Yeah, me too. The $100 buy-in, winner take all. That's sweet.
Chuba's actually been putting together a couple of really great games over the last couple of weeks of the season, and to everybody's shock and surprise, actually. And I think that he's a good option there at the running back.
And the other thing is, Tyreek playing the Cowboys might have his best game of the year because he needs to make up for not playing last week in terms of all of his stats. Miami has not played does not have a quality win. They basically can't win without him, although they destroyed a horrible team last week that quit. I think Tyreek could win this thing right here. I see that. It's a very good system that ended up working out.
Like Chuba's been, since I think the last time we talked about Chuba, Joe, was when they played Chicago back in the early part of November. Mm-hmm. And we were saying, I said, Chicago's defense was really good against the run. I wouldn't start Chuba. There was talk about starting Miles Sanders, and a couple people were like, "Oh, do I start Miles Sanders?" Ever since that week,
Miles Sanders has disappeared.
Ever since that week, and particularly in the last 3 weeks, he's gotten over 20 carries the last 3 weeks. So in every single game, he's gotten over 20 carries. He's been what Jerick McKinnon was for teams this in 2022. He is that for a lot of teams this
yeah. So Randy, let me break this down between fantasy and real life.
Yeah,
they love Chuba in fantasy because they keep giving the ball exactly as you said there. The reality is they're afraid of breaking their quarterback because he has no confidence anyway. That team is playing to get the first pick. There is no explosion.
And all roads to do that lead through Chuba.
And that does bleed through Chuba. So Chuba is having a fantastic fantasy benefit. Ride him all the way to the end. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about guys we want to have on our team that was on our championship team last year, I don't want to have Chuba next year.
Well, and Randy,
they're going to have a real offense.
I like the chance that you took on Gibbs as your hero running back one there, because going into the season, Joe was really high on Gibbs. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of question marks for Gibbs going into this season. And at the beginning, I remember
the 12th or 11th pick.
I remember coming out of work and talking with Joe after Ayuk's big blow up and saying, might be fair to say, you could trade Gibbs for Ayuk and a second
Get you a second,
rounder
King.
or something like that. But Gibbs has been quietly, and not so quietly in some games, but quietly putting together a good second half of the season since the end of October. And, with the game last week where he went off for 100 yards rushing, the injury to Montgomery did spark some confidence in him on the team because he didn't have that before the Montgomery injury.
Oh, so he traded for Gibbs. Got it.
Yeah. And he boomed. Exactly.
And also the thing was, they're starting to lean on Monty less. So King Jack, my man, Bob, you love kicker questions.
Defense questions. Love defense. Love kicker questions.
Love defense and kickers.
Right.
My starting answer, I'll start with the defense here, Bob. I'm gonna just divert all kicker tech to you as it is. But as we go with the defense here, playing New England kind of is like always the answer. It makes me weird to like
Chicago plays Arizona though, dude.
I know, but here's the bottom line. Kyler Murray could do something stupid and run for 100 yards and just put up 3 touchdowns. They did score against the Niners. New England only can score against the Steelers. I think that's been pretty much apparent. He's not playing the Steelers. It's a road game. It's thin air, cold, all that other crap that Denver brings to the table. Mm-hmm. Denver needs to win it, and New England has quit. So to me, that's kind of the end of the discussion.
Yeah, although the Bears have a really good matchup against the Cardinals, and the Bears have been playing better in recent weeks. And I've said this before on a couple weeks in a row here, is the Bears defense is, they're solid. They did pick off Flacco, for 2 or 3 picks last week, but then they ended up letting him get touchdowns towards the latter part of the game. They played Detroit really well, and they're giving up points though. So the thing with the Bears is that the Bears are not one of those defenses that will not allow you to score, I guess, is how I want to put it. They're never going to put a 0 on the board in terms of scoring defense. But the question is will they cause turnovers? And I'm just not 1,000% sure that they're going to do that. They have, if you go to team rankings and you pull up Chicago, in their last 3 games, they've had 3.3 takeaways on average, right? So it's a good spot for Chicago. George, we'll get to your question.
They're coming in now, Bob. We're going to speed this up.
So in my mind, I do love the Broncos against the Patriots because Denver has also been able to – they haven't caused a lot of turnovers, but they do have the capability to run one back if they do pick you off. Mm-hmm. But I'm actually on the Bears on this one because I think they have a better chance of scoring defensively, although I think that the Broncos will probably keep – I think it's the same situation as from last week. I think the Broncos will probably keep New England scoreless or as close to scoreless as possible, whereas the Bears will have a better chance to boom for you than they would Denver. And so when it comes to your other question here, we'll get to your question. We'll get to that second part too, King. As it comes to the kickers here, Santos or Myers. Okay. So the reason I love these kicker questions so much is because Joe and I, we always laugh about this going into the season is like, well, which kicker am I going to pick this year that's going to just like constantly disappoint me or get hurt? I always get a kicker that gets hurt. Like this year it was Fairbairn and he got hurt. Koo was underperforming too. So who do I want? This is definitely a toss-up for me. I think with Cairo that you're tying yourself to that. You're double tying yourself. If you go with Cairo and you go with the Bears defense, you're double tying yourself to that ugly, ugly game in Arizona, which could be a blessing. But Tennessee is not a strong team.
Mm-mm.
And Myers is a decent enough kicker to outperform the metrics there that he might have. They're going to score touchdowns. Seattle is going to score touchdowns. Now, the Bears might pull up short a couple of times against Arizona. So in my mind, I go double Bears, and I hate that. But
I'm still going with the Broncos defense.
I'm going double Bears, but I wouldn't be too beat up to go Jason Myers too, because I know that Seattle is going to be putting the ball downfield a lot more. And there's probably going to be a bit more opportunities for field goals to happen in that game. But the only thing to worry about with this Bears game is the weather. So when you look at the weather here, King, revisit it on Sunday. If the weather looks bad in Chicago, Myers has to be your play.
So here is the loaded kicker question for you, Bob. And Randy, you also were right earlier about Gibbs being unleashed off the horn. If we're looking at all of these kickers, my answer is going to be Buffalo. And the reason for that is because Chargers quit. It's inside, and you're going to make some points. There's not much more to it than that. Chargers are going to get blown out against the Bills. You might get more extra points just from extra points than some kickers will give you overall.
Yeah, I think that Buffalo's kicker here is a good play. He's like he could miss a field goal, but there's a good chance that Buffalo's going to be able to move the ball, and they're going to be able to move the ball really well. And so it's probably going to set them in to have the opportunity to kick a decent amount of field goals if they don't score touchdowns. I think that Bass is a good play this week.
I also think Buffalo's covering the over by themselves.
Secondly, I think Koo is a good play too. I think that Atlanta will be able to move the ball against Indy. I don't think that Indy will be able to lock them down. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be a lot of points in that game, but it could definitely be a lot of field goal points. So out of those kickers, Randy, I would go Bass and then Koo.
Waddle, Olave, or Kupp? So Kupp's a no doubt starting point here, George. And we get in the issue here of Waddle or Olave.
George, I was thinking about you. I was thinking about you this past week. I'm glad that the roster that you're sending us got in. I'm curious. Did you go with Waddle in that game after everything that we talked about last week?
Olave was out last week, so of course he did.
Yeah, I think that in this game, I think that I go with Waddle. I think I go Waddle and Kupp. And I like the idea of Olave here, George, because we said earlier when looking at the stats, the Rams have given up the third highest yardage total to wide receivers over the last 3 weeks. So Olave, if he is 100% healthy, has a really good chance to go off. But it's going to be hard for New Orleans to score in this game because the Rams will put a stranglehold on you with Kyren Williams. And the Saints don't have that ability to do that with Kamara because Kamara's not that type of player anymore. I don't know if he ever was. He never felt like that, but Kyren is that guy that could just pound the rock. And they also have Royce Freeman, who is a good backup in his own right here. So
Freeman's solid.
The question is that, with Waddle, we saw Dallas, that was disappointing for Dallas Cowboys fans over the last week. But, Dallas is going to come back with a vengeance. Miami is probably going to come out and really perform here too. So Waddle feels like a really good play. And with Tyreek back, like Joe said, Tyreek, if he's 100% healthy, he's going to try to go for 300 yards in this game. So the only downside to Waddle is the fact that they might push it more to Tyreek Hill, knowing that he's trying to go for this record, missing a game, and try to get him that, and hopefully get him that early. So I go Kupp and Waddle, but I'm really tempted to play Olave.
I'm not. I'm going Waddle over Olave. I think that there's going to be plenty of garbage time for Olave, but I think that the Dallas game is going to be heavyweight blow back and forth.
Mhm.
And I guess the
I see that
concern with
game
Waddle is
being like the Seattle Dallas game was, where there's a lot of points.
Mhm.
And the wide receivers are going back and forth trying to get whatever points they possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's the only fear you got with Waddle is that Dallas just showed they can't stop the run and they're going to attack it.
Yeah. And Randy, we'll get to your two questions too. King here, choosing a running back two. Would I play Brees, Kenneth Walker, or James Conner? I think I go with Kenneth Walker. I think Kenneth Walker's matchup is good, and I think that Brees's matchup is good.
Brees's matchup is great.
The only problem is that the team is terrible.
That's so true.
And so, you know, when you look at what's been going on, Tennessee's let up. They're 23rd over the last 4 weeks. And over the course of the season, Tennessee is 14th overall in terms of points given up to running backs. But we're just concerned about these last 4 weeks because a lot can change over the course of the season. And even if you just go the last 2 weeks, Tennessee is 29th in terms of points given up to running backs. Yeah. So there's a very good chance that a healthy Kenneth Walker will be able to do something against this Tennessee team. Now, the only question you have is Zach Charbonnet going to do something against this team? You know, but with news of a shoulder injury to Kenneth Walker, didn't practice yesterday. You've got now another question mark, and you say, well, what's this about? Because he just came out against Philly, had a great game coming off an injury. Now he's dealing with another injury. This is the Kenneth Walker situation. We all know that this happens with every Seattle running back that ever comes into our life. One week they're good, the other week they're hurt. It happens. This is what has been happening to Seattle running backs for ages, outside of Sean Alexander many, many moons ago. So I think Kenneth Walker is the strongest play out of these three running backs because the offense is going to be able to move the ball. Drew Lock looked okay. Geno Smith, when he's healthy, looks okay. This offense is going to be able to move it against a Tennessee team. Do I think that there's going to be a lot of points scored in that Tennessee game? I'm not so sure about that, but I think the yards will be there, and I think he might get a touchdown there. Now, as it goes, Joe, talk to us a little bit about Breece Hall and what it's looking like for him.
So the thing with Breece is he's playing against a team to quit. I mean, Washington doesn't stop anyone. So, and he's clearly the best player on that team because you don't want to throw the ball. You don't even know who's really playing quarterback for you. So when I look for there, Breece Hall playing against Washington is huge. Everything you just said, though, about Walker is true. And if Walker's healthy, I'm going with him. I mean, if by healthy, I mean dressing. If Walker's on that field, I'm going to play him. The challenge you get is what we were talking before, is that actually, correction, Walker's the first game on Sunday. You don't need to worry about that at all. If Walker's playing, to play Walker. I think that's the end of the discussion. You take the team that needs to win versus the Jets and Arizona that are like, eh. Take the team that needs a win. Seattle's certainly in the thick of it, and that's where I would go. Is K9 as important as Breece Hall is to his individual offense? No, but at least I know Seattle's going to score. And they're
a player that I'm not starting at all, King, is Connor. He's not even in discussion. The Chicago defense has been too good against running backs in recent weeks. If you look at the last 4 weeks of the season, they rank 6th against the running back. So, you know, yeah, that doesn't strike confidence over the, like I've said, over the totality of the whole season. They're 22nd. But they have played better. Granted, they haven't played great teams, but they've played better against the run there.
Hey, Bob, this one kind of answers how far the mighty have fallen, man. Olave or D-Hop?
Thanks for the question, Randy. We're going to get to your two questions in a moment here. Olave or D-Hop? Okay.
Yeah, I know,
So
man.
this is a tough one where if you just go on stats, D-Hop against Seattle, Seattle's secondary has been struggling.
Mm-hmm.
It is a perfectly good matchup for D-Hop. Let's check this out here. Yeah, I mean, he's gonna probably face up against their best corner, but Burks is also back. Burks is also back. He's coming back from being like having nothing going on the whole season, not being healthy, struggling to be a good wide receiver in the NFL. He's back, and so will that help D Hop? It might. I'm not saying it's going to help tremendously. And I think that you really have to keep an eye on if Derrick Henry's playing or if Tajay Spears is going to get the rock a little bit more.
Well, you don't get that choice. You got to make this call in 2 hours.
It changes it a little bit. But like I said, I really like the chances that Olave could have against this secondary in the Rams because the Rams, like I've said, have given up a tremendous amount of yards and touchdowns against wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. And just going off of that alone, it would scream that you've got to go Olave. But I think that the sneaky play is that the game, there's going to be a lot of yards in that Seattle-Tennessee game. Maybe not a lot of points, but there's going to be a lot of yards. And D-Hop is definitely one of the catalysts for the Tennessee offense. So despite what I like about Olave, I think that D-Hop is a better play this week in terms of yardage and PPR points.
And on the opposite, for a main reason here, Pete Carroll against rookie quarterbacks is really, really good. And that's what you're going to have to deal with D-Hop. You got a rookie quarterback. I'm not saying that New Orleans is lighting the world on fire, but when you look at what Carroll does against rookies, it tends to be very, very hard day. And there have been games under the new rookie that D-Hop has disappeared. I would lean Olave, especially since I do believe there's going to be a lot of garbage time and Olave is going to fill it. I think Kamara is going to be useless tonight and Olave is going to be the show in New Orleans. And that's the direction I'm going to go there. That being said, I'm not really expecting for much more than probably 15 out of either of them. But I definitely think Olave is the direction I would go.
Yeah, and to Joe's point, Ikenna, here is that the last 2 games that Olave was fully healthy was against Detroit and Atlanta, and he topped 100 yards in both of them. Mm-hmm. The last game that D-Hop was, that he got over 100 yards was against Miami. But he did have 9 targets last week against Houston. And, obviously they didn't do anything in that game. He only had 2 receptions. So he is capable of getting locked out. But over the last 2 weeks prior to that, so you have 9 targets, 12 targets, 12 targets. So are they going to be good targets is the question. Are these going to be just garbage targets? Or are they going to be high value targets as they move down the field? So,
stars and scrubs, baby. Stars and scrubs.
This is something that we brought up at the beginning of the season. Joe and I both thought that the Rams would not be a good team this year because you couldn't name anybody on their team other than Cooper Kupp. You could not, and Stafford, you couldn't name.
Look, let's be honest. If it wasn't for fantasy football, you wouldn't be able to name Kareem either.
Yeah, you could not name a starter on offense or defense that wasn't Cooper Kupp or Stafford or maybe even Higbee, and that's only for the fantasy people. If you were just a casual NFL fan, you probably didn't know anybody that was left on this team. Mm-hmm. So yes, doesn't
make you that person at all. It makes you normal. You should enjoy being normal, Randy. It's a good thing.
So hopefully that helped, Ikenna. That if you really are feeling Olave this week, even outside of coming back from that injury, he is a really, really good play. And like Joe said, a solid 15 points is probably in a PPR league is probably a good floor for him this week, pending, we're going to get that injury report and all that stuff. Carr doesn't play good traveling against the Rams either. So there's a couple things to look at there. But even when he doesn't play good, he's been putting up 300 yards a game. So that's kind of dirty and kind of gross. But we looked at Carr over the last couple of weeks, and even when he plays bad statistically or from like a game management standpoint, he still manages to throw over 275 yards to 300 yards every single week. So if you're looking for that, Olave's your guy. If you're hoping for something different, you could go Hopkins. But like Joe said, Olave is a really good play this week, and I'm borderline safe play. If he wasn't hurt, you wouldn't even be thinking about this. That's the thing. If he wasn't hurt, this wouldn't even be a question.
That's exactly it.
So
Bob, you ready for the bets of the week?
Well, hold on. Well, let's answer Randy's questions here.
I love it.
What about Fairbairn? I love Fairbairn. I picked him up this week. I was riding the Riley Patterson Suck Express because I missed my waiver wire 2 weeks in a row to pick up a different kicker, but I didn't need it because I had already secured a playoff spot, so I wasn't really worried about it. They're playing against the Browns. It's going to be fine. Fairbairn, despite Stroud not being
there.
Dude,
if Bass was an option, it's not a conversation.
Yeah. Though. I think Fairbairn for me is I picked him up because what I saw last week with Case Keenum, there's going to be opportunities in this game for Fairbairn to kick some field goals. It's not going to be something I love, but Bass is a way better option than Fairbairn in that discussion. And then also Bears or KC versus Vegas. KC has to be the play. Despite what I said about the Bears, we did talk about Kansas City earlier, and Kansas City's matchup, although it's not although you're looking at, Aiden O'Connell, they just put up 63 points last week, and you're saying, wow, that's a lot of points. Mahomes isn't going to allow that to happen. And he isn't going to allow that to happen because he's Patrick Mahomes and he has that nice, Bryce. Nice. It's good to
love
hear
it,
that.
Bryce.
To finish this thought here, Mahomes will not let the Raiders be on the field that much to score that much because they need to win too. So
I'm glad you brought that point up here, Bob, because that's exactly right. The Chiefs are going to be playing a ball control version. They're not going to play a let's sprint. They're also not going to quit midway through the first quarter. That being said, though, Vegas plus 10 is one of the picks of the week, though.
Mm-hmm. Bryce, send us what are you looking for this week in terms of when we look at who you're playing against? What's the matchup look like? Because I'm really, really curious what your matchup looks like this week. Because there's a lot of good teams in this championship game, in the semifinal game. A lot of these teams have Christian McCaffrey. A lot of these teams, they're really balanced squads. So, CMC, Amon-Ra, AJ Brown. What a terrible week to draw that. Like, oh my God, and Olave too. Yeah, I hate
that guy won the league, dude. I'm sorry, Bryce, but
every year that happens. You have a great season, and then you're winning your playoff games. You're looking
that
good.
guy had a great season too.
Holy crap! That's an all-time roster right there in terms of fantasy production. Rashaad White came out of the woodwork this year, proving everybody, all the haters, wrong. I was a hater early on.
Amon, AJ on the second turn.
Yeah, Amon and AJ Brown. There must have been some trades there because Christian McCaffrey at the 1, AJ Brown at the 2. It was that 2-3 turn.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The second turn,
AJ Brown that late in the 2. That is crazy. To be able to overcome those two big injuries and come back and be able to play in your championship game is one of the best feelings. So I feel for you, Bryce. I'm hoping for a win. I'm hoping you can skate by, but I need AJ Brown to have a tremendous week as well for me to get into the championship game. So we're at odds there a little bit.
That will happen. That will happen.
But I don't have any of the other guys, so all those guys can have bad games. Just so long as you get that win.
Pull for you, Bryce. It was your fault in the draft. The draft matters, people. I don't know how to say this.
The draft does matter, and that's a good point, Bryson. Joe, let's talk about this before you get to your best bets. If you have time.
Absolutely. Well, I'll always talk about don't draft quarterback high.
Quarterbacks were toxic this year, 1,000% toxic. We made a video about way back in the summer, I believe it was in July, about our top 15 quarterbacks at season's end. And I believe I had Daniel Jones in that ranking. And
you had 3 of them that are injured right now.
Yeah, and that was predicated on a full season of playing. And this is the year of the backup quarterback.
Yes,
and this is also the year of, CJ Stroud, a rookie quarterback coming out of the woodwork. It's putting trust in the wrong rookies as well, like Bryce Young, Kenny Pickett, and guys that overperformed last year that underperformed this year, Geno Smith, guys that underperformed last year and that are performing well this year, Russell Wilson. These are all guys that were players that people were even overlooking Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott was going in the 10th, 11th round in most leagues. And people were saying, Trevor Lawrence, you're looking at Trevor Lawrence. We were even saying, this team looks pretty good with Trevor Lawrence on it when we were doing our mock drafts. But Dak has been putting together one of the best seasons that he's put together in a long time. And it just goes to show you that this whole narrative is going to change next year. Quarterbacks are not going to go early. You're going to see quarterbacks fall back down.
Lamar will.
You'll see quarterbacks fall back down into that 4, 5, 6, 7 range. A lot of people will sit and wait on quarterbacks. And outside of maybe Lamar and, Patrick Mahomes is not having a great year this year, but outside of Lamar and maybe Hurts, a lot of them are just going to keep falling. So let's get to this question for Bryce, and then we'll get to the question for McKenna. You're welcome, McKenna.
All right, Bryce, you know my inherent hatred of Monty, so that's a fact. Can't hold that one back. So
I think
I like Kenneth Walker. I have to say that if Walker's playing, I want to go with Walker. And the same thing's true with Aaron Jones. The fact is, I like taking players who really, really are playing for something. And when we look at this overall, the Packers need a win. Seattle needs a win. Yeah, Detroit's in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, that's not the same Monty Gibbs lineup it was before. Gibbs has taken that over, and I don't think I want to be a part of that. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about how Chuba is just doing stuff because, long story short, Carolina just is punting on the rest of the season, and they're doing so by handing it off. So if I'm ranking your backs, assuming that either Walker or Jones is out, Hubbard would be my next man up with Monty being my last. And then the question is, do I want to play Amari Cooper over Hubbard or Monty? And let's pull up this one here real quick.
So,
Bob, is that one on the road or no? That's in Houston. So I would go with Cooper then, because I would, because first off, he doesn't do good when it's cold outside. It's a dome, so problems off the table. Flacco threw that ball in a dart to him, and when things got real and they started covering Njoku, Cooper started opening up in that game. Flacco does not care if he throws an interception at all. The guy has on a pace for way more interceptions than Josh Allen, yet we're complaining about Allen constantly and praising Flacco.
Well, that's because Josh Allen was drafted so high. Flacco is a Super Bowl winning quarterback that hasn't played like consecutive.
No, I'm not talking about the fantasy community. I'm talking about the overall life community. But Bryce, you know me. I'm
Here's what I go with, Bryce. Bryce, welcome, Reborn. We'll get to your question after Akena's here. Here's what I go with. The narrative all season has been the Panthers have a terrible rush defense. This is only because of the way they've been playing football prior to the last 3 weeks. Prior to the last 3 weeks, this was a Bryce Young-led offense. Now it is a Chuba Hubbard-led offense where the ball is staying on the ground longer. When the ball is staying on the ground longer, you're not working your defense to the bone, ragged dry. The Panthers have ranked 9th over the last 4 games. Now, that's, notwithstanding the competition, but 9th in fantasy points given up to running backs. So while Aaron Jones looks like that matchup on paper, from the totality of the whole season, looks good, I wouldn't play Aaron Jones. Ooh. Now, on the other side of things here, you look at Hubbard. Hubbard's been, like we said, toting the rock, doing a really fantastic job. And over the last 4 weeks, Green Bay has been terrible in terms of fantasy running backs or fantasy points given up to running backs. They rank 26th. And so that's down there with bottom feeders like the Chargers. Okay. So you're looking up and like the Jaguars and the Colts and the Commanders and the Cardinals. So you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, I'm starting Hubbard. I don't think Hubbard can be taken out of your lineup right now because he is playing that good. I'm starting Walker, depending on his health. If he's not healthy, then I'd probably slot in Aaron Jones. And if Aaron Jones isn't healthy, then I'd go to Monty. But my 3 would be Hubbard, Walker, and Cooper. And I don't think the other 2 are really close to the caliber of these 3 players right now.
See, my bottom thing is Green Bay needs a win. Aaron Jones might be their most reliable.
I get they need a win, but that game, it's the way the game flow is. I think they're going to pass the ball a lot more. And then because Aaron Jones still working his way back, they're going to give it to either Patrick Taylor or Dylan. And it's not going to favor Aaron Jones at all. So let's get to Kenna's question here, then Reborn, and then back to Bryce. Kyler or Stafford? I think.
See, for me, I'm going Murray on this one.
Yeah.
And here's the reason. When they get in the red zone, they hand the ball off. And they really haven't been having Stafford throw in the easy ones. Arizona's all about stacking Kyler's stats to try to justify that contract they did and to try to brand him as the future. They are going to try to push Kyler. Granted, they're a team that doesn't really have anything to play for. They're playing a team that doesn't really have anything to play for. So I would go with Kyler, probably putting up points in a losing effort. Mm-hmm. When we look at this overall, this could be who's the most overrated real-life quarterback between Murray and Fields, both fantasy monsters, not so much real-life winners. But I'd go with Kyler in probably what's a very high-scoring game, despite the fact neither of them are really playing for anything.
So I'm on the fence with this one. The Saints defense has been really good against quarterbacks. Granted, they haven't played a tremendous amount of good quarterbacks over the last several weeks.
And I think that hurts.
And this is a team that needs rest. So they're coming back. They're playing on Thursday today. It's a team that needs rest because the stars are older, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They got young talent, but with that notwithstanding. Stafford has thrown 2, 3, 3, and I believe 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games that they've played.
They're scoring, yeah.
The only question here is how will they blow them out early, like Joe has been saying is a possibility? If so, this is a Kyron game, and Kyron's probably going to rack up like 160 yards on the ground. I like the idea of Kyler Murray. I don't like the idea of Chicago in the wintertime at Christmas time, which is going to be a deadly scene for any opposing quarterback. The fans are going to be into this game. Are
they going to be there?
I think they will. This is holiday games even with teams that suck, and it's proven with Detroit. Every Thanksgiving there are fans in the stands. The Bears have stronger team following than the Lions on a holiday. They're going to be there at the game. This is going to be a family affair for a lot of families. And it's a game they can win. And those tickets, they're gonna try their best to win this game. You look at, and this is just something fun to think about. These tickets are as low as $29. So
seems like a lot of people don't want them.
the weather's probably going to be bad. It's not going to be a blessing. So this does not benefit quarterbacks in general.
It does if they run.
It does if they run, but I think that I'm on Stafford, Joe. I think that I'm on Stafford, and nice, George. I'm glad to hear that you. I was thinking about you with that Chandler. I was like, oh man, we were thinking about.
Well, thank you, Reborn. First off, Merry Christmas to you too. Here, so
wrote him off, and I was like, oh man. But let's get to Reborn. Thanks for answering that question.
So, really my answer here is going to be the literally the way you wrote it here. You know, and the reason being that you don't know what you're getting out of the Jets. If the Jets were anything decent, Brees would jump Bijan, but I have no idea what that game is going to be. That game could be both of us. Let's just leave 9-6 and it's over. That game could be all we're doing is scoring touchdowns because neither defense wants to be there anymore.
Yeah.
You know, if I had a bet, Brees is going to be a big part of the game plan, but that doesn't mean it's successful. I'm going with the two that matter. I mean, again, they're playing a game that matters. They're playing against each other, and they should be the focal points of their respective offenses.
So as I've said earlier, and I'm going to repeat that about Bijan. Bijan has been a general disappointment over the last several weeks and basically the whole fantasy season. And it's hard to put your trust in that guy for that specific reason.
He'll go in the second round next year.
But Bijan is facing a team that does give up a lot of plays to running backs out of the backfield in terms of receptions. And so there is value to Bijan this week because he is used as a pass-catching back. His value is tied to that pass catching. He hasn't been running the ball a lot. They've been giving it to Tyler Algier. Now, with Simeon starting at quarterback for the Jets, this is not a blessing.
No, this is an interception factory.
You're looking at you're looking at Breece Hall's carries over the last 4 weeks. 7, 13, 10, 6. And out of those last 4 games, the total of those yards is not over 100. The only thing to consider in those last games was against Houston. He caught the ball a lot. So let's take it back a little bit. Let's take it back a little bit and ask ourselves, do we think Simeon is going to be throwing the ball to Breece a lot in this game? We don't have a lot of stats on Trevor Simeon at all. He's a backup for a reason. He's a third stringer for a reason.
Yeah, he is.
And this game, like Joe said, could probably get really, really gross and really weird really fast.
Really unwatchable.
But with that said, Washington is susceptible to a lot of things. If you look at the stats over the last 4 weeks, and I just keep bringing up the last 4 weeks because teams have changed coaches and they've changed what they do in terms of their schemes and stuff. When they do that, the Washington Commanders have only let up 77 yards over the last 4 weeks to pass catching running backs. And so you go back and you say, well, like, who have they faced? Last week, it was the Rams. They have a decent core of running backs. You go to the week before, they had a bye week. So you go in and you think to yourself, okay, being a third string behind Tim Boyle is, that's pretty gross. I don't think Breece is an option despite the really good matchup.
That's a long way to get there. Yeah, but it's the right answer.
So JT and Bijan are our 2 plays this week out of those 4. And this goes to answer George's question a little bit here too. And Bryce will definitely get to your question, is thinking about Ty Chandler. This is something we brought up earlier in the episode where, this is what's going to happen here with Minnesota's offense, Joe? Speak to us a little bit about how you feel this game is going to go, because it might give us a nice clue into should Ty Chandler, with that monster week last week, is he due for another great week?
Well, they need him to. Let's just start with that. They're at a train wreck at the quarterback position. So the one who's winning the most out of all of this Minnesota free fall is Kirk Cousins. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at the way Minnesota plays, they're no longer at the let's throw it 5 million times and who cares how often he gets hit like they are when Cousins is in. So
Welcome,
they're going to
Smitty.
have
We'll
to
answer your
rely
question.
on Chandler. There's just not an option. Will it be successful or not when everyone in the house knows it? Well, I mean, we'll see. I mean, they Mullins at the end of that game just looked so defeated that I don't know how you could rely on him. And knowing how Detroit approaches football from a psychological standpoint, I think they're going to beg Minnesota to throw the ball and attack Chandler and try to win that game early defensively, cause a lot of 3-and-outs in the first half. And then at the end of that game, you won't be able to run it. So I see a very tough sled for a productive Ty Chandler this week. That being said, if they can overcome it, you give him a hole he can go. So yeah. I think that it's going to be a situation where it might be switching up and might actually benefit the receivers this week in terms of matchups in a way that you haven't already seen, because no one's had to sell out to stop their run all year. But because of the quarterback situation, I wouldn't gauge it as a bad strategy. Sell out the run, then have Mullins throw you the game at the end.
And to that point, the stats back that up to say Detroit on the season is the #1 team against fantasy running backs. Fantasy running backs have been averaging, on average, 16 points. So do we think that Ty Chandler could get over that hump? Yeah, I mean, he showed that he had the talent to do that. But in the last 4 weeks for the Detroit Lions, they've ranked 4th. So this is a game that definitely will feature those wide receivers downfield. And most likely, Hawkinson is going to be involved in this game as well. When we look at tight ends, again, like the whole season here, you're looking at the Detroit Lions ranking right near the middle of the pack, 21st in the league in terms of points given up tight end wise, and they're 22nd overall in the season. Hawkinson could have a really good game, and Ty Chandler might not benefit from the Detroit Lions being able to hold on to the ball as long. I mean, because you look at what happened in that with Ty Chandler, Minnesota had that ball a bunch. And that benefited Ty Chandler a lot. And I don't know if they're going to have the ball as many opportunities as they did last week. So let's get to Bryce's question here. Then let's go to Smitty and then Nino. So thanks for the questions, everybody. Feel free to keep asking.
Keep shooting them.
So, Bryce, should I consider a running back if Olave plays poor at the flex? So going back to what we said earlier.
No, you can't think like that. You got to go with your best lineup moving into it. You can't be reactionary after the Thursday night game.
And I don't think Olave is going to play poorly, unless the injury unless that injury comes back. I don't think he's going to play poorly at all. He has some really good opportunities here. Smitty and then Nino, Mixon or Walker. We think that Mixon is going to have a good game.
He should.
He's
have also a good not game. Hurt.
The Steelers are not despite them being able to get a good rush on the quarterback, they're not very good at defending the run.
They're not.
And the Walker injury it makes the decision harder here, because you have to know to play Mixon on Saturday before you get the health of Walker. So I would really look for any news Saturday if Walker played on Friday to see what's going on, because you might be forcing your hand to play Mixon because Walker might be hurt. I think Walker has a really good matchup this week, and Mixon has a really good matchup this week. They both can put up the same. I mean, you look up at Mixon. Mixon is perfectly capable of getting 60 yards and a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Walker's perfectly capable of getting 60 yards and a touchdown. This game's in Pittsburgh. The fans, it's the day before Christmas Eve. The fans want to go. I mean,
fans also are going to see Tomlin's last home game.
They want to be supportive, but it's going to be a pretty gross game. So I'm on Mixon.
I think Mixon wins it. I think Cincinnati wins that game pretty aggressively, actually.
We answered this question earlier, Smitty, about Kyler and Stafford. Joe's on Kyler. I'm on Stafford.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaning Stafford just because Joe thinks this game is going to be over pretty early, and I don't see that. I see it being slightly a little bit more competitive, but to Joe's point,
I think it finishes close because of garbage time points, but they're still winning by a touchdown.
And to that point, Stafford has been playing really well in the last couple of weeks, and where the points for Kyler will come against Chicago would be against the run, or would be as a running quarterback. But when we look at Chicago overall, let's see how they are against the rush, in terms of rushing quarterbacks. So they haven't had to play any rushing quarterbacks. They haven't had to play anybody. So this is going to be the first real test for that. So I'm really curious. But also, insofar as that is true, if the weather plays any role in this game, there are probably going to be less opportunities for both of these teams, offenses in general, because it's probably just going to be a decent amount of running by the Bears and by Justin Fields, and a decent amount of running by Arizona. But Arizona's running is not as good as I think Chicago's is, so that's kind of why I fall on Stafford a little bit more. So, Nino, welcome back.
Welcome.
Should I be starting Stafford tonight or get Flacco for this week?
I'm definitely Stafford over Flacco.
Yeah. I'm on Stafford over
Flacco's giving you 3 picks. Whether he wins or not, it's irrelevant.
And that's the problem we brought up last week. We had someone on the show, I believe his name was Dylan. We were talking through quarterback situations, and the options were slim. I think Will Levis was on there. Joe Flacco was on there. And we ultimately settled on Joe Flacco, with the caveat being that it was known that he was going to throw interceptions. He's the only guy from that list that had multiple touchdowns, but he's also the only guy on that list that threw for multiple interceptions. So that's really something to worry about Flacco. I don't think Stafford throws a lot of interceptions tonight. At worst, you're probably getting 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. At best, you're probably going to get 324, 325, somewhere in there, with 3 or 4 touchdowns. But that's a big if with Stafford, because Stafford's utility is only with his arm. It's not in the running game at all. So back to the Kyler question, with the dual utility, is it better to play someone with dual utility in a worse matchup than it is to play someone in a better situation in general? It's a tough question.
Yeah, and again, it's one of these things where obviously Stafford over Flacco is a no doubt, but the reason it's not even about the dual utility part. It's just the Rams like running the ball in from the 5-yard line in more than most teams. They just like doing it. So that hurts Stafford opposed to getting the short little sneaker touchdowns that like Dak has been taking over with, for example.
Oh man, if this is true, that'd be crazy.
What was that?
My God. So I know that everybody in here probably followed the Carolina game last week, where tickets were going for like 45 cents at one point in time because the weather was going to be absolutely atrocious. This Christmas Eve game between the Commanders and the Jets, $10.
How about that? We know you love looking that fact up.
It is the lowest price game this week.
as we just hit across the 6 o'clock hour, we normally wrap up then. Let me give you the bets of the week. Coming in reverse order of kickoff. We're going to be going with Baltimore plus 5.5 at San Francisco. Vegas plus 10 at Kansas City. The over in the Denver New England game, over 34.5. The over in the dirty, stupid game we keep talking about, of 37 of Washington goes to the Jets. $10, going to see 42 points. And then tonight, also the over 45.
So we wish everybody a happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Hopefully a great championship week. We'll be back next Thursday. We're hoping to see that we're in the championships in our league, that you've won your championships. Feel free to check back in. Keep us posted. We really do want to know.
And we will be breaking down playoff fantasy football for those that love that game, because I know I do. So we'll see you all guys next week, and we'll go from there.
Enjoy.